The reason I put this title slide up is for the most important part, which is my email address down at the bottom, which you can see is jsilverm@adobe.com. But I'm just going to talk for just a few seconds before we dive into the apps, just about the mission statement of CS4. Adobe's kind of mission statement in general is to revolutionize how the world engages with ideas and information. It hasn't changed at all. But the three kind of big bullet points on CS4 that you are going to be interested to know about it and are going to want to see practical examples of are the time savers, the things that bring your average workflow down from 15 clicks to 2 clicks, for example. The integration across all of the different Creative Suite products. So, if you've got part of your design workflow is occurring in InDesign, which is traditionally a print application where, it's been very difficult in the past to get design comps over from InDesign to anywhere else. You're now going to find that coming over to Flash has become a lot easier. And integration between some of the other applications, the web applications and the design applications is tighter than ever before. And you're going to see a lot of new things that you may not be expecting from your web apps that are exciting, that kind of get you more engaged with the applications and allow you to create more engaging, expressive experiences. So just to jump into that expressiveness and talk about, some of the kind of major bullet points in that innovation or in that expressiveness, right? We've always known that Flash and Dreamweaver and Fireworks and Photoshop allow this level of expressiveness when you are dealing with them. You can create stuff that you couldn't create in any other platform, in any other design application. But the ability to create these new lifelike animations in Flash is just unbelievable now, and we're going to look at that. And if you weren't in Terry's meeting just earlier today, so we're not going to touch on this now, but the ability to paint and composite 3D models in Photoshop Extended is really exciting, especially for 3D artists. And Dreamweaver has a lot of really great productivity and expressiveness enhancements with the ability to test interactions and accurately view web page designs. And there's a lot of other features as far as that goes. So the time savers, right, being able to go from InDesign directly into Flash is probably one of the biggest bullet points that we can talk about, and we're going to spend a little bit of time on the Exchange format that allows that to happen, which is called XFL. And kind of the ability to round-trip content among all the different applications, including what you'll see there over on the kind of in the middle on the left, this new application which is in prototype right now, not in beta yet, called Thermo, which actually has a newer code name, which is going to be its release name, called Flash Catalyst, which we're not going to dive into today since it's not part of CS4 and isn't, as I mentioned, in beta release, but we can talk about what the new workflows for Flash Catalyst are going to be. And, of course, being able to do mobile content with CS4 and capture metadata and do a lot of productivity enhancements. And then finally, the idea of integrating community into Adobe software, right? There's what we're doing right now, which is sharing our desktop and kind of sharing from all different ports in the storm, as it were. So there's a new ability within the Creative Suite to do this kind of screen sharing and this type of collaborative workflow, not only through the Acrobat Connect Professional, which is the tool that we're using right now, but there's a new kind of prosumer or consumer level application called Share My Screen or Connect Now, which is accessible from directly within any of the Creative Suite apps, which allows you to very quickly pop open a screen sharing pod and allows you to share what you're doing with other creatives without having to have a professional account. You get a free Acrobat.com account, and that comes along with CS4. There's also Cooler and in-context editing, which we're going to look at all of which are available to access directly from within the Creative Suite. So what you're seeing is these traditionally desktop applications now having network connectivity, so that when you're on the network, those apps are aware of databases and of connectivity that can only happen on the network. So you might be able to pull in settings, you might be able to pull in color harmonies, you might be able to pull in actual content directly from the network using your desktop application. So that's it, no more PowerPoint. Jumping right on over to, InDesign. Right, this is not part of our normal, what we think of as our web applications. The reason I want to show this to you, the web guys, is to let you know what's going to be coming down the pike for you from the print people. Because once your print folks get a whiff of InDesign CS4, they're going to be bringing you all sorts of stuff that is going to be coming out of InDesign, a lot of which is really cool, but just going to show you a little bit of the nuts and bolts. There are two new different ways of exporting web content from InDesign, which traditionally there were none. So this is a huge step forward. The first one for you web guys might not enter your world so much, except for the fact that the print people might make something such as the following demo and then ask you to kind of touch it up, which you're not necessarily going to be able to do so well unless you can decompile SWF files with great effectiveness. Adobe doesn't make a Swift decompiler. There are a lot of freeware ones out there, but buyer beware on them. So, but what we're going to do in this demo is just create a very simple Swift file out of InDesign. And I'm not going to go too much about. I'm not going to bother you with the details since you won't be doing it. But basically, in a multi-page InDesign comp, such as these, right, you'll notice that I'm clicking around and looking within different pages in the InDesign comp. I can create buttons. Now, have a look down here in our master page, and I've got just a very simple set of triangles, which will take us forward and backward. And I'm just going to grab both of these by holding down Shift and kind of bring them up into the main master page comp. And now have a look over on my right-hand side in my buttons panel. You can see that the average print designer can now basically program these very simple triangles as interactive elements. So they can, say on release, on click, on rollover, on roll off, and then they can give actions to them, such as, go to next page, or go to a URL, or open a file, or anything that you would typically do with ActionScript, or with JavaScript or HTML for that matter. You can now have that kind of access to do this programming within InDesign. You also have the ability to do these, to create rollover states. So if I wanted to have my rollover state and just change the color really quickly, where's my swatches, right? I would just roll it up and turn it to black, and as you can see, that rollover state turns to black. So this is giving your print folks, a really nice, easy way to make interactivity. And as we know, nothing is ever easy, but this is definitely much better than they had it before. So this will choose to go to previous page, and now once we collapsed our swatches panel, let's come on back out, and you'll notice in our regular pages we've got these buttons now that we're able to use. But if we want to create some transitions, if we're going to previous and next, we can just select our page transitions, and I'm just going to come in and choose, and your print person gets this nice, beautiful set of animated transitions that they can apply all across each spread when they're creating their SWF output. So, right, I'm not going to bore us with any of this, so I'm just going to choose a nice wipe, and I'll click OK. And so now, each time when we output this to Swift, these page transitions are going to be in effect, and we have a page transitions panel over on the left-hand side, which allows us to change the direction. Like, let's say we want it to wipe up instead of down, and we want it to be fast instead of medium, and then we have a button to apply that page transition change to all the different spreads. We can also create hyperlinks and do all kinds of stuff. I really just want to be able to show you here the file export from InDesign and show you the options that we're going to have once we do that export. So I'm going to export this as an SWF file, right? And let's just do this on the desktop in our output folder. And so when I click that, you'll see that we have a whole bunch of options, right? We could scale this up. I don't want to scale this to 125%. I just want it to be 100%. And right, we can do these all as pages. We want to generate an HTML file, and we want to view it after exporting. If we want to preserve the searchability of the text within this, we can have InDesign text to flash text, because as we know, Google and Yahoo have signed agreements with Adobe to add parsing technology into the browser. So SWF files that have real flash text in them and not rasterized text are now searchable. So if we want to preserve that searchability of the SWF, we can keep InDesign text to flash text, or we could flatten it out if we wanted to. And we can also include this interactive page curl down here and the page transitions and hyperlinks. So I'll zoom out and click OK. And once we've done that export and we're generating a SWF out of InDesign, you're going to see Firefox pop on open with that exact SWF going on in our browser, right? It's embedded the SWF in an HTML page, and then it launched the HTML page. And as you can see, we've got those nice transitions. Hopefully they come through via Connect, and this is just paging through. So your average print designer with just a few clicks and a few specifications of buttons now has the ability to do that. And notice when I roll over some of the pages, I can now click, and InDesign has created that lovely page curl transition, the ability to grab the corners of pages, which you know, is familiar to us from Zinio or Issue or any of those, you know, print to web types of you know, applications that you see online. So just thought you guys should be aware of what you're probably going to be seeing a lot of soon. But what's probably more interesting to you out of InDesign is the ability for print designers who don't have a lot of web experience to export to this new file format called XFL. And XFL is kind of an exchange format that is exportable from InDesign. Notice we have, in this example, we have yet another print document that is multi-page, right? And it's pretty static, right? You as Flash people can probably imagine how this is all going to get you know, moved around, and how this might become a very kind of engaging animation. Right now it's very flat, but you know, this might become in a browser or in a SWF a lot more engaging and a lot more you know, animated. So all we have to do out of InDesign now is say File, Export, and instead of going out to a SWF, we go out to this format, which is the Adobe Flash CS4 Pro XFL. Right now, as a company, you know, I believe McCann and pretty much all of the IPG group is under a non-disclosure agreement with Adobe. So I can tell you that the XFL format going forward is going to be the kind of main Flash authoring format. Now, we've preserved the FLA format in CS4 because obviously it would be a little bit difficult to just get rid of FLA without kind of giving anyone a heads up. But the main problem with the FLA file format is that you can't really use it in a lot of different versioning softwares. You can't. It's not diffable, right? You can't. The version software can't diff it. They can't look into it. And you know, once your FLA file gets corrupted, that's pretty much the end of the story for it. There's no saving any of its components or anything like that. It's pretty much dead. But with XFL, I'm going to show you a little bit what's under the hood for XFL and show you why it's going to be a better, kind of leaner, meaner, stronger authoring format going forward after the CS4 timeframe. So right? I'm just going to export that as XFL. I've actually already exported it. I wanted to save us a little bit of time, but you know, we get the same kind of parameters, right? Do we want InDesign text to flash text? Do we want vector paths? Do we want to rasterize it? And so basically, once we've exported that XFL file, we get something that looks like this, right? Just your standard .xfl file, which is really a UCP, a Universal Container, or I'm sorry, UCF, Universal Container Format file, which, if you were to rename it to a .zip file, you'd be able to right-click it in Windows or Mac and usually use Stuff at Expander or use WinZip to extract all of the kind of contents of it. And what you get are an XML file, right? And that XML file is kind of the master XML document that describes pretty much everything that's going on in that layout. So in other words, right, remember we had 9 different spreads. So you see that those 9 different spreads are each described in a separate XML document, which is contained inside of this library folder. And the library folder not only has those 9 XML documents, but it also has all of the separate image assets and the image elements that are contained within this InDesign file. So if this InDesign file is using you know, an image of this gentleman here, that image is going to be turned into a PNG, and I guess I chose the wrong one right there, but you can get the feeling of what we're looking at here. Each one is turned into an individual PNG and then is referenced within one of those XML spreads. So as you can imagine, this is much more kind of visible by many different versioning you know, software applications. So all we have to do, I know this is kind of belaboring the point of what XFL is, but if we were to just double-click on this XFL, it would open up directly in Flash CS4 Professional. So now I'm in Flash CS4. I've double-clicked my XFL file, and here we go. We've got that same layout, and I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger, and I'm going to collapse my panel set so we can get kind of a full view of it. Now you can see on our Flash timeline, right, our timeline looks kind of familiar. We've got the timeline up here, we've got the stage up here, and our panel set over here that has our library. As you can see, we've now got one layer on the timeline with 9 keyframes, and inside of each keyframe is a separate movie clip, right? So each one of those spreads in InDesign was created as, is described by those XML files as its own individual movie clip. So this is spread 1, and if I just scrub the playhead to frame 2, you're going to see this is a separate movie clip that contains all of the different graphical assets. And then here's spread 3, or movie clip 3, and you know, digging down into the library panel, we can see, right, we've got, just like we had in the XML file and just like we have in the InDesign file, we've got spread 1 through 9. So basically, I know this is probably the least sexy feature of Flash CS4, but it's probably one of the most revolutionary. I mean, I know you guys were probably using Flash, you know, MX 2004 and MX and stuff like that, and I know when I was using those and trying to get Photoshop and Illustrator assets over into Flash, it was always the hugest headache that CS3 helped out a lot with by having Illustrator and Photoshop import directly into Flash. Excuse me, but when it comes to getting InDesign, the print designers were left out in the cold. But this is a huge step forward. And I'll show you what happens when we kind of click down a little bit into our Flash movie clip, right? So this is spread number 2. I'm just going to double click, and as you can see, I've now entered into spread 2, right? We've got the breadcrumbing up at the top of our stage that shows us that we're now inside of spread number 2. And now I can basically hit Command A, and I just selected all of the different assets. So all of those assets are laid out on the stage inside of Spread 2. And I'm just going to, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here to show us, right, we've got that asset. And if I just select my text tool, you'll see that that text is still editable within there. So I'll say cover page instead of cover story, and we've got, we've retained the editability of the text. So that's pretty great. That's you know, taking over the legacy of Photoshop and Illustrator import. So that's wonderful. And then if I wanted to, you know, kind of break these out and animate them individually, I could select them all, do a right click, say distribute to layers, you know, and Flash is going to take a while to break all of those assets out into their individual layers. But then once I've done that, I can animate them individually. And I have here, you know, kind of an example file of, you know, a file that we've done a little bit more with, just to kind of stoke your imagination of what's possible going straight out from print to the web. And hopefully this comes over Connect pretty well. But this is just the same idea, just fleshed out a little bit, right, and running you know, inside of Swift, just to show you some, you know, what's possible. And I'm sure as web guys and gals, you already have a pretty good imagination of what you could do once all those graphics are laid out exactly the way you want them to be. I like this one because it actually has a cart, like a click to add, and you know, like kind of a shopping cart functionality, which I'm sure you can imagine you could plug into any sort of back end that was developed using the Flex framework or the Flex builder, and you know, maybe add some cart functionality right into here, and work with the print designer to kind of get a nice design on that. That's pretty great. Now, another function of XFL is not only to import from InDesign, but also to import from After Effects. And this is that overlap that I was telling Melanie about, that hopefully whoever's in the room and who does a lot of After Effects, you know, might really appreciate this new feature. Now, XFL can be exported not only from InDesign, but can also be exported from After Effects. So as we see, hopefully it'll come over Connect a little bit. I'm just going to hit the return key and let this run. And this is a set of 3D animations that was done completely in After Effects, right? We've got this kind of shotgun, or well, I guess Magnum, or I guess that's a 38. That shows how well I know my firearms. So, you know, we've got a bunch of different animations that were all done completely in After Effects. Not a single frame of this was done in Flash. And I'm just running through it really quickly just to show you what it's made of. And now I'm going to dig inside what that XFL file looks like when you turn it into a zip and then unzip it. You basically have all of the videos that you were using inside of After Effects kind of flattened out as FLV files. And when you're inside of After Effects, you actually have the ability to choose how you know, how the FLVs are created. You know, what bit rate you want, what frame rate, and etc. And what kind of you know, alpha channel you want to include in those FLVs. Because as you can notice, if we come back to our Flash comp, I'm just going to come back to page 1 there, and let's come out to where the gun is. Right, this gun actually has an alpha channel inside of it, so that if I turn off the background layer, you can see that our gun, which is right there, I'm just turning it on and off, the gun FLV actually has an alpha channel embedded in it. So you're able to do, you know, export stuff that has transparency, especially if you're doing a lot of compositing, that you'll see the value in that. Now, when it comes to third-party plugins, or you know, you're doing a lot of kind of complex scripting in After Effects, what you're going to want to kind of flatten that out, or do some pre-rendering before you actually do your XFL export, because without that pre-rendering, your mileage is going to vary quite a bit. So it's definitely recommended to you know, flatten out or render out a lot of you know, kind of your third-party effects and or your After Effects scripting. effects if you're going to be using those before you output to XFL. So, you know, one of the and here's another. Let me see. Yeah, I think it's this one right here. This just gives you an imagination of what's possible of inserting that interactivity into your comp, right? So this gun and all of the other animations, everything here was done in After Effects, but just given a little bit of spice, a little bit of jazz, a little bit of interactivity, you know, and just calling up each one of those animations individually. You know, and I'm just clicking through to make these effects happen. So as you can see, you've got a lot more fidelity coming from print and coming from video when you're bringing your pieces into the web. So you've probably noticed by now that we have a little bit of a theme going on in our demo assets, and the theme is this kind of film noir-ish movie called Double Identity, which you know, we're producing in LA, and so you know, we've been tasked as the web team. If you just suspend your disbelief for a second, you know, I'm sure McCann gets tasked to build all kinds of promotional Flash material. So you know, you won't have to imagine too hard. But for this particular example that we're going to show, we've got a Flash movie that, oops, I keep dislodging that. I really just want to show inside of our timeline a little bit. I'm just going to fit that in the window. And just have a look really quick at the kind of microsite that we're building for this movie. Now, this movie is called Double Identity, and there's something missing in this Flash animation, and I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I think it might have something to do with the fact that there's no logo, right? We're not seeing a Double Identity logo, even though we know what the name of our movie is. So the reason I bring this up is because we're going to use a logo insert onto our stage to kind of demo some of the new animation features in Flash CS4. And I'm sure you interactive guys have probably heard all about it. And you know, the really exciting part of this is that the animation is actually a new, we have a completely new animation model, and it's called an object-oriented animation model. And what that means is that when you create tweens, or you create animation effects between different keyframes, no longer is the tween that you create mapped specific to those specific keyframes. It's actually mapped. The tween is created as an object all by itself and can be manipulated as an object and not mapped to specific keyframes. So this is really exciting because it gives you a great deal of flexibility in creating your tweens, and I'm going to show you what exactly that means. So on our top layer here, we've got the Double Identity logo layer, which I've already created just to make this a little bit easier. And I'm going to come on into our library, excuse me, and grab our Double Identity logo. I'm just going to drag that right onto the stage, and nothing's going to happen. It's not going to let me. Huh. Let's see. Oh, maybe because actually my playhead needed to be there. So here we are. We've got our logo, and I'm just going to drag it around the stage. You see, nothing really happens. Now, in the old paradigm, if we were going to create a tween, we'd bring our playhead out to a place where we wanted to create a keyframe, and we'd right-click inside the timeline, and we'd say, you know, insert frame or insert blank keyframe or something like that, and then we'd move our, well, let's see. Let's say we're going to insert a keyframe. We're going to move this out, and then we're going to, you know, we'd create a tween, and it would move, our logo would move between point A and point B, between frame 1 and frame 40. But we have a new animation model. I'm just going to undo what I did. And this new animation model allows us to just right-click and say Create Motion Tween on that movie clip on our stage, and automatically check out what Flash CS4 did. It created a span of keyframes up in the timeline, and it actually created 30 frames because we have a 30 frame per second animation. Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit to show you this hot text, which is something you're going to see all over the Creative Suite, which allows you to kind of grab. I'm just clicking and dragging, and I can increase or decrease the frame rate just by clicking and dragging. Right now it's 31 frames per second. Now it's 44 frames per second. Right, and I'm just going to leave it at 30. Or I can also just click in there and type 30. And, no more having to hit Command J to go into the document properties. I now have that hot text. And you're going to see this all over the place within Flash and within the Creative Suite. So since it's a 30 frame per second movie, we have a span of 30 frames within our motion tween. And now, you're not going to see this over Connect, but my icon, when I roll over the edge of our motion tween, has changed to some arrows where I can just click and drag out the number of keyframes that we want to create and make sure that our tween is actually as long as the entire animation itself. So, right, coming back, let's come to frame, I don't know, 70, 60, 69, and we can grab our element and we can just move it and watch what happens. By the way, have a look at the new, at these new, what are these called, smart guides. And these smart guides basically allow you to align whatever element you have dragged to any other element on the stage. That's a nice new enhancement. You're going to see that in Fireworks also. But now when I let go of this movie clip, have a look at the motion path that Flash has created for me. Isn't that a beautiful, lovely motion path that you never had in CS3 or before? And not only that, but notice that I'm right now, my playhead is on frame 70, but if I wanted to change the origin point and the destination point, all I'd have to do is click once on the motion path that Flash has created for me and then drag that motion path. And have a look that Flash is allowing me to reposition not only the destination point of my span of my motion tween, but also the origin point. So I can move that all around very quickly and easily just by clicking and dragging my motion path. But if I wanted to change just the destination point, I could move it over here and notice that my motion path has adjusted. Or if I wanted to change just the origin point, I could click and drag the origin point and notice that now the origin point is different as well. And I'm just going to move it back to where I want it to be, which is right there in the center. And let's say I wanted to, tweak this out a little bit with Bezier Curves. I'm just going to grab that and move that over here now. And if I wanted to bend my motion path using Bezier Curves, all I'd have to do is grab my subselection tool, hold down my Alt key, and look at that. I now have Bezier handles with which I can tweak out my motion path. So going from frame 1 to frame 70, look at that. Right? Beautiful and completely unprecedented in the history of Flash. I can also, just with my select tool, I can roll over any point, any keyframe along my motion path and just grab it and deform the curve however I like. So this is all very beautiful and revolutionary, but this ain't nothing compared to the transformations you can do within the motion editor panel. So if you haven't seen this before, especially any of you who use After Effects, you're going to just roll over dead after I'm done with this. Have a look here in the motion editor the motion editor panel, which I have open here, and we have to make sure that we actually have our tween selected. And the motion editor panel basically allows us to visualize. I'm going to collapse our other panels over here so we can get a better view. It has a collection of visible properties. We can now change the X, Y, Z, the skew X, the skew Y, any of the different properties that can change in this movie clip over time. We have a view into those changes with the motion editor. And I just have a button here, or hot text, which will allow me to tweak the viewable frames, because right now we're only seeing the first 30 frames of our animation. And notice inside the motion editor I have the same level of access to the timeline as I did within the regular timeline, but I'm just going to come down here to our viewable frames, and I'm going to click and drag so that now our visible frames, we can now see the entirety of the motion tween, right? So we now can see all 160 frames that we created before. And let's say I wanted this animation not to be 70 frames long, but let's say I wanted it to be 45 frames long. All I would have to do is grab the endpoint inside the motion editor, right? You see that we're looking at the X and Y over time. Excuse me. And all I'd have to do for this destination point is click it and drag it all the way, and notice that I'm getting that tooltip telling me which frame I'm on, right? So at frame 45. So our tween hasn't really changed. We've just remapped the keyframes. Remember how I said this object, this animation object, is not mapped to any particular keyframes? Well, this is proving the point right here, is that we have just shortened the amount of time that we are taking, and we've basically remapped our tween to the existing keyframes within this animation. So we used to have 70 keyframes, now we have 45 keyframes. And even within this wonderful motion editor, I can grab the origin point and I can tweak it. Notice that I'm dragging it and tweaking it and making the X value, the original X value of the origin point, bringing it all the way down so that it matches the X placement of the destination point. And I can do that with the Y also. Have a look where I'm just changing the Y very simply. And I also can do that with my hot text over here. So if I wanted to create just a very simple tween over time like that, I could do that as well. But I'm going to undo that. I want it to stay kind of in the, I want it to stay in the same spot right there. And now I'm going to tweak it around in 3D, right? It used to be that you'd have to use Sandy or Paper Vision or any of these, ActionScript 3D engines to do 3D manipulations with, with any of your elements on the stage. But now you have the ability to use this tool called the 3D rotation tool. We also have a 3D translation tool, which we're going to use. But I'm just going to use this 3D rotation tool to very quickly spin this guy around on the Y-axis. Now, check out, by the way, we've got this new tool, the 3D rotation tool, and just something for you to remember going forward if you're going to be using Flash CS4. Just a little mnemonic that they came up with, which is RGB equals XYZ. So if you've done any 3D in the past, you know that the Y-axis is the vertical axis, and the X-axis is the horizontal axis, and the Z-axis is the one coming in and out towards you or away from you. So if I wanted to do R, and then I'd be transforming the X. So R is red, so here I am. I'm just clicking and dragging on that X-axis, and I can flip my asset vertically, or I'm not going to want to do that. I'm just going to make it a horizontal, right? I'm going to spin it along the Y-axis, or I can spin it along the Z-axis, which we don't really have, 3D translation happening right now. So, or we can use this orange ring and just kind of free transform, free rotate, and do any of those transformations like that. But I am going to just spin it on the Y-axis really quick. I'm going to zoom back out, and notice that the motion editor has now given us a Z basic motion guide here, that when I come out, and also notice this is a lovely new feature, very reminiscent of After Effects. We have these arrows that allow us to go to next keyframe, add a keyframe, or go to previous keyframe. So I'm going to go to the next keyframe, which is out at frame 45, So I'm going to spin this around again. Watch what happens to the Z property. Oops, I'm sorry, the rotation Y. I said Z, but I meant Y. Right? Look what happens to the rotation Y property. It's gone all the way around, and now I can make that an even 0. So from frame 1 to frame 45, we have that nice spinning effect. Let's say I wanted to zoom in using a 3D translation tool. So I'll just go and grab my 3D translation tool. Actually, I'm going to come back to frame 1 and use my 3D translation tool. And so let's say I want to zoom this in. Notice that I have these new guides, and I'm just going to click on the center button, and you can see that I'm just dragging like so, zooming it out or zooming it in, and I'm creating a 3D zoom, which is different than the scale. It's actually working along a vanishing point. But I don't really like the vanishing point that I'm getting here. Notice that it's not a centered vanish point. What if I wanted to center my vanish point so that it's not kind of vanishing to the upper left, but I want it to vanish directly to the center? So I'm going to undo what I just did, and I'm going to open up my Properties panel and have a look in my Properties panel here. This is now, instead of having my Properties panel down along the bottom, it's now a panel which I can collapse all kinds of properties inside that panel. It just makes it, I find this Properties panel a lot more organized than the Properties Inspector of the past. But let's see. If I wanted to change my vanishing point, have a look in here, I can just click and drag this hot text, and have a look on the stage while I'm clicking and dragging the hot text. You see those crosshairs that are coming up? I'm just changing the X value of the vanishing point crosshairs so that the X axis is now in the center and meeting the center registration point of my movie clip. And now with the Y, you see that horizontal plane is now moving up and down, so I can change the vanishing point to be directly in the crosshairs of the center registration point of my movie clip. So now, when I go and change the Z property with the 3D translation tool, notice that now, since the vanishing point is now in the dead center of the registration point of the movie clip, it now recedes directly back, and notice my Z property has changed as well. So now we're zooming in and we're spinning around, right? Two 3D effects that are not possible to perform on movie clips that are on the stage, in a timeline-based animation in Flash CS3 or before. We also have the ability to make, minute transformations or minute changes to color effects. So, for example, if I wanted to modify the alpha over time, right? So I would just click in here and give that a 0 alpha at frame 1, and then zoom back out to frame 45 using my go to next keyframe, and now give it a 100%. Right? So now it's fading up, spinning, and zooming using 3D and alpha effects. And let's give it a little bit of a blur too. Let's give it a filter, right? So I'm going to add a blur. And so notice, I'm just going to collapse my stage a little bit. Look inside of our motion, our motion editor. We've got all of these different properties that we're able to tweak out. I think it's so great that Flash finally has a visual way, a way for visual people who are mainly visual users to create animations in a very intuitive manner. And let's just, instead of having a blur X, I'm going to give it a blur Y of 50 pixels. And I'm going to come on out to frame 45, and ow, that hurts. So I'm going to make it 0. And notice just the ease with which I'm able to make these changes. This is crazy. So now the last thing that I'm gonna give to this is an ease, right? And notice that we can add any number of different eases in here. And I'm gonna try a bounce in ease. I actually need to come back to my first frame before I do this. And I'm going to add a bounce in ease, which is going to give this the effect of, right, notice that this is what our bounce in ease, and I can strengthen that, right? I'm just grabbing the hot text and strengthening our bounce in a little bit. And I'm going to apply this bounce in ease to the Z transformation that we have going on. So I'm going to come back up to our Z transformation, and I'm going to assign the bounce in, right? And so that bounces in a little bit. Let's actually make it a little less strong. Right? We're going to make that a little less strong. And notice that we've now applied that bounce to our animation. Right? It kind of bounces in like that. So it's not perfect. I do have a little bit more tweaking to that ease demo. But as you can see, we've got a whole bunch of different eases that we can apply, or we can create our own. So that's very cool. And so that just gives you a little bit of an idea of the new animation model. Another great new feature of Flash, and I don't want to dwell on Flash too much more because we still have Dreamweaver, Fireworks, and Device Central, and the Adobe Media Encoder, and all the other great stuff. So I don't want to get too stuck here, but I did want to show you some of the other new great stuff that's happening in Flash. Primarily, I'm going to go back to the timeline and bring our animation a little bit further out. And we're going to notice, right, we've got these actors coming in. And notice that the actor's name on the left-hand side of our animation is coming in nice and smooth, but the lady, the actress's name is not coming in very smooth, right? So we've already done quite a bit of work on his name to make it kind of slide in with the opacity and the easing and all that. But we don't want to have to redo all the work that we've done to her name. So all we have to do in Flash CS4 is create what's called a motion preset. And have a look in this panel that I just clicked on the right called Motion Presets. Now we have a bunch of default presets that we can apply, and you're going to notice that, right, we can apply a bounce motion or any of these different types of motion presets to any element on the stage. But I don't necessarily want to apply a bouncing ball. I want to apply that same motion that we gave to Mark's name. Right? Notice how Mark's name is sliding in nicely, but Wendy's name is not. So all I have to do in Flash CS4 to apply that nice slide in effect is to click on the element that is sliding in, or whatever property, whatever element is has that animation applied to it. I can just right click and say Save as Motion Preset. Let's call this one First Name. I'll click OK. And notice that in my Motion Presets panel, First Name is now saved as a motion preset, so that when I click on Wendy's name and I come back to my Motion Preset and I click the Apply button, notice now that Wendy's name flies in with the same finesse that Mark's name slid in with in the right amount of time. So all the keyframing that we've done, all the tweening and all the adjustments and the eases that we applied to Mark's name have now come through on Wendy's name. And if we click on the last name and right click and say and call this motion preset, and we call this last name, now we can click on Wendy's last name and in the motion presets panel apply, and let's just test our movie and have a look and see. Right, that's beautiful, and the names are coming in very nicely. But this is happening at night in LA, and I don't know how it is in Detroit, but in New York you can't really see the stars at night when you look up at a cityscape like this. But in LA, at least so the legend goes, you can see the stars at night. So I kind of want to paint some stars in the background here, and I've already actually created a star movie clip, which, as you can see in my library, if I were to double-click that star and have a look at the individual movie clip timeline for that star, you can see that it's actually like a nice, happy little twinkling star that we've built. Very simple, nothing too complicated. But I want to get that star into the background. So I could have create an action script that would randomize it, but that would actually take a lot of time. Or I could just take the star and drag it, and then resize each one individually. But as we know, looking into the night sky, there's a lot of randomization that happens in terms of how close the stars are and how they're twinkling. They're all twinkling in their own way. So one of the new tools that Flash CS4 allows the designer a little bit more of this rich expressiveness with is a tool called the spray brush tool, right? Which you're going to see right here. So if I before I open the spray brush tool, I'm going to close my library and open up my properties panel. And now I'm going to grab my spray brush tool and have a look at some of these default properties of the spray brush tool. And I'm going to zoom in. So you can see that we could start spraying any movie clip or any graphic that we wanted as a particle effect, or as a, this is called procedural modeling in the particle effects world. So if I wanted to do some procedural modeling with this, kind of spray brush icon, or the spray can tool, I would need to load up this brush with the graphic or the movie clip that I'd want. So I don't want this default shape, which is this black rectangle. I'm going to unclick that, and as you can see, I have a selection through all of the movie clips that I've created. So I'm going to choose the star. I'm going to click OK. And I want to scale it down. If you remember, that star was kind of big, so I'm going to make it, 30% of the original. And this is setting the high end, right? Any star that I paint on my background here can be 30% the size of the original or smaller, because I'm going to randomize the scaling, right? I can randomize the scaling, and I can also randomize the rotation. So each one of these stars is going to be rotated slightly differently, which gives a very, kind of starry night type of feel. But I want the brush that I'm painting the background with to be kind of large. So I'm going to make it 400 pixels wide and 400 pixels high. And notice we've got that hot text, so I could make the brush bigger or smaller just by clicking and dragging. Right? Gotta love that hot text. I love it. So now I'm just going to make sure that my stars layer, right, I've got a stars layer down towards the bottom between the city and the ground layer, and I'm just going to click, and hopefully you can see this via Connect, but I just painted a bunch of randomized stars in the background that when I go ahead and test my movie, you're going to notice in the SWF, and I hope this comes over via Connect, and we'll just kind of let it come in a little bit. Right? Notice that our stars are twinkling all in kind of a randomized way, and they're all rotated slightly differently, and they're all on their own kind of individual time frame. And so those particle effects, or that procedural modeling, is a new way of doing designs in Flash CS4. So that's very unique and exciting, and we've gotten a lot of great response from customers on the expressiveness of this tool. So we've got all of our stars. We've done motion presets, and I guess the last thing that we'd want to insert into this would be a sound. So I'm just going to, a sound or a soundtrack. So I'm going to go up here and create a new layer. I'm going to call it sound, or audio rather. I'm going to go ahead and look at my library. Do I have any audio in here? I don't think that I do. So I'm going to go ahead and say File Import to Library. And I'm going to import a new file, which is a new file format for Adobe called the ASND file format. Now, ASND stands for Adobe Sound, and it's basically a file format that can be opened with Soundbooth CS4 or Premiere CS4 or any of the CS4 Production Premium applications. And what it allows you to do is edit all of the elements non-destructively inside of your editor, which in our case is going to be Soundbooth. So now that I have my audio layer, and I've imported my Adobe Sound file, I can come into my Properties Inspector, and I can assign that Adobe Sound file to that layer. So now that I've assigned it, it gives me some diagnostics on it. If I want to apply any effects, I can apply those effects. Do I want it to repeat, or do I want it to loop, and how many times do I want it to repeat if I want it to? And also within the library, I just want you, the web people, to notice this cool thing. Inside the library, I now have the ability to search within my library. Notice that I can, I've got a bunch of movie clips called car, so I'm just going to enter car, and notice that in my library, only the elements that are called car are in there. So that's something that Flash developers have wanted for a long time. Let's see, double, right? So I'm just typing in DOUB, and I'm only getting the logo and the ping. So that's very nice. And there are a lot of new enhancements to the project panel too, but I don't want to get too sidetracked. So now that I have this audio, notice that our audio and our waveform has been entered into our, up top here into our layer. But now when I preview it, and you're not going to hear this over Connect so well, but when I preview it, some of the levels, at least the dialogue levels, are kind of screwy. And you're not going to hear it so well. But if I were to right-click inside my library on my ASND file and say Edit with Soundbooth CS4, I'd be able to open up Adobe Soundbooth. And inside Adobe Soundbooth, which I already had open, by the way, I'd be able to open up the entirety of this clip. And now, so notice that we have MultiTracks, which is a new feature of Soundbooth. And Soundbooth is really the audio editing application du jour of the Creative Suite. And Web Premium, Production Premium, Master Collection, you're going to get Soundbooth. And some of those tasks would include just being able to do very simple volume correction. Like, for example, I've got some snippets of dialogue down here, and if you notice, their dynamic range, or their volume, is actually pretty limited. And if I just wanted to do very simple volume correction, I would just do very simple, normalization or equalization. Right? Notice that's not very well normalized. But if I just with one click inside of that dialogue, if I click Equalize Volume Levels, you'll notice that the entire thing is equalized. But every dialogue clip will have a different level of equalization. So if I go into Dialogue 2 and Dialogue 3, if I were to normalize these individually, they would all come out as slightly away from one another. In other words, they wouldn't normalize to the same level. So we have the ability in Soundbooth to match volume across many different files. So in other words, I normalized, or I did equalization on DIA1, this file up here. But if I were to grab all the other dialogue audio files that are included in this Adobe Sound document, and I were to just drag them down into the Match Volume dialog, and I wanted to match them to DIA1 or DIA1, I would just have to click this Match Volume button, and now each one of those, 3 files now have the same perceived loudness, the same normalization as our first dialogue, our first swatch of dialogue. So that's really great. Very simple, nondescript. And what's also really wonderful about Soundbooth is that I don't even have to save this file. I can come back into my main document and notice that all of the files have now been updated with the same normalization. But that's not really all. I can come back into Flash and just right-click and say Update. And when I click the Update button, I didn't save my file in Soundbooth, and that audio has been updated with the new audio levels in Flash. And like I said, you're not really gonna hear it. You're not gonna necessarily hear the difference when I compile this SWF, but it's really great to have straight out of Flash, the Flash IDE, you have the ability to do audio editing, audio sweetening, and you know, a great you know, it feels like a nice natural extension to Flash. So there's one more really awesomely cool thing. First of all, I've been talking for like an hour now without stopping. Before I launch into the next segment of the web stuff, does anyone have any questions for me, or is everybody still awake? I know this is after lunch.
Oh, we're shocked.
We're all here. We're riding along.
All right. You know, like, feel free. I didn't want this to be a you know, just me talking without any questions. So please feel free. I know that I'm very presenterly, and I just kind of turn this into a narrative. But if you you know, if you have any questions, feel free to interject. Like, I'm not you know, this doesn't have to be one way.
Sure.
But I mean, the reason that I like turning it into a story is because there's, you know, we only have a couple hours, and there's so much new stuff, and I want you to get excited about it, and you know, feel like it's worth your time, and so just you know, feel free, stop me, just let me know how I can help.
Okay, definitely.
But without that, I'm just going to barrel through, because I personally find this stuff so engaging and amazing that you know, it's hard for me to contain myself sometimes. So excuse me. I'm just going to go into a new panel inside of Soundbooth CS4, which is called the metadata panel. And I don't know if your company uses the XMP metadata format for any of your graphical assets, for tracking your photos, or tracking your Illustrator files, or your InDesign files, or any, you know, XMP is a very powerful way of kind of creating metadata and creating metadata templates and tracking your assets over a large, you know, content management network. But one of the wonderful new features of Soundbooth is the ability to not only identify metadata within any file that you bring in to edit, but it also can create metadata in the form of transcriptions. So this is a kind of a revolutionary new part of the story for CS4 and for the Creative Suite going forward, is the whole idea of taking an audio file, taking a video file, taking something that has human speech associated with it, and transcribing that speech and turning it into text, and then associating that text along with that file as metadata. So this can be very powerful, especially on the web side, if you want to create an application that can parse through a video asset and you know, search through it and make it A, more accessible, and B, more searchable. Right? We've got a whole lot of video on the web right now that that companies have to tag in order to have it searchable, but you can't actually queue up your video online. At least I've seen very few video applications, and more are coming up on the web space, where if you're serving up a video where you can jump through, and the speech information for the spoken words in that video can be turned into tags, or can be turned into marker points along the video timeline that you can queue up or that you can search through. So you know, I'm just going to do a really simple example right now. I'm just going to create a new empty audio file at 48, sure, whatever. And I'm going to just choose to record my voice really quick, just to show you that you know, this isn't all smoke and mirrors. And I'm just going to go ahead and click the record button and say, "This is a test of the emergency broadcast system." So now I stopped it, and I'm going to hit close. And now I'm just going to hit transcribe. And as you can see, this is a test. Right? Hopefully you can hear that. I'm just going to get rid of some of that dead air. And now I'm going to hit the transcribe button down here in the metadata panel in Soundbooth. Right? And as you can see, it transcribes the waveform into speech transcription metadata. Let's hit transcribe. And if I were, you know, if I were speaking in Spanish or French, you know, either Spain Spanish or Latin American Spanish, any of these other languages, the Soundbooth speech-to-text engine has a way of transcribing it and you get two different options for medium or high quality. And if there are more than one speakers, you can actually choose to identify the speakers. So I'm just going to click OK, and usually it's about 1-to-1, 2-to-1, even though it'll give you, when you first start it up, it'll give you some outlandish number like 15 hours that it's going to take, right? 3 hours and 22 minutes. But after that, it usually doesn't take too long. And now if we have a look on the lower left, I'm just going to zoom in, and in our transcript, in our speech transcript window inside the metadata panel, this is a test of the emergency broadcast system. And notice that it capitalized emergency broadcast system. That's pretty cool. It has a pretty nice dictionary. Now, when I click on the word this, notice what happens in my sound timeline. Soundbooth recognizes what it's naming as this, and is, and emergency. And so when I play through the document, notice what happens on the left-hand side. It's going to parse through.
This is a test of the emergency broadcast system.
Right. So just use your imagination a little bit, and think about what is possible with video in this scenario. So I'm just going to grab a QuickTime movie. This QuickTime movie right here, and drag it into the Files panel of Soundbooth. And I'm going to switch back to Soundbooth. Right, so now I've got that lovely video file in there, and I'm going to make my Files panel a little bit smaller, and I'm going to make my video panel a little bit bigger. And notice what happens when I play it through. We've already done the transcription. I didn't want to take up a minute or two of your time, so we've already done the transcription on this. And this is a video of the director of our film noir movie talking about how using After Effects is so great. You don't have to schlep everyone out to Hollywood. You can use After Effects and use a green screen and do compositing and make this real film noir look. So, right.
And not a huge Hollywood budget. You can actually produce a film noir movie and then use After Effects and all the rest of the tools in the package to actually.
Right. So that's great. But right here he says then, so I can just double click in there and correct it instead of the. Right? I mean, it's not, excuse me, it's not always going to be, 100% accurate in every case. But if you're recording with a pretty good fidelity microphone and not a lot of background noise, it has a pretty impressive effect. So now that we've done that, you're asking, how do we actually associate this with Flash video? And so one way that you can do it, and I'm not here to tell you that there is one way. We could just kind of right-click here and say copy all, and then go into text edit and let's close that and make a new one and just kind of paste it in there, right? So we can just copy-paste our transcript if we want. But another way of getting it out of Soundbooth is to say File, Export, Speech Transcription. And this exports our transcript as an XML file, right? A speech transcription XML, which incidentally is the same format as the Adobe Flash QPoint Exchange format, which you can embed into an FLV or into an F4V and have cue points that are indexable within the FLV playback component inside of Flash. So that's really cool. That's not how we're going to use it here because that's a little bit more involved of a demo. But once we, once we've created that XML file, and let's see, here's that XML file. I'm just going to open it up and show you under the hood what it looks like. Right, this is the same, like I said, the same cue point exchange format that you need to create to have cue points within the FLV playback component. So now we need an FLV to associate if we're going to create that association. So creating that FLV is now done with a new tool called the Adobe Media Encoder CS4, and hopefully you guys are seeing the zoom in that I'm doing, right? Because this is the new icon for the Adobe Media Encoder, which ships with Web Premium, Production Premium, and Master Collection. So the Media Encoder is basically the next evolution of the Flash Video Encoder from CS3. And I know you probably remember the Flash Video Encoder and its kind of limited abilities. So now the Adobe Media Encoder not only can do FLV, it can also do F4V. And F4V is basically just a container for H.264 video that is playable within the Flash Player 9, the movie star release, which I don't remember all the numbers that go after that. But F4V is playable within the Flash Player 9 version 3 release and above. So, H.264 video, which is really great, but the Adobe Media Encoder also gives you the ability to encode all of these other formats, right, from AIFs and WAVs and MP3s to QuickTimes and H.264 for Blu-ray, MPEG 4, MPEG 2 for DVD and Blu-ray, right? You got a lot of different. It's actually quite versatile, and you can set up a lot of kind of advanced settings, which we're not going to get into. The only thing I wanted to show you was the ability to kind of come in here and look at our F4V settings, right? And this is the main concept H.264 video. We could also go through and instead of F4V, we could make this FLV and make this a Flash video with the onto VP6 codec as well. I believe we're also able to do Sorensen Spark. Yes, we are. And one of the nice new features inside of the Adobe Media Encoder is the ability, and I know the video guys in the room are probably drooling at this, to be able to do 2-pass VBR encoding of your FLV, which you were never able to do with an Adobe video encoder before. Now you have the ability to do it. Yay. It's a wonderful world that we live in. So we also have the ability, like I was saying before, to import some cue points. So over here on the lower left, we have an import cue points dialog with which we can pull in that XML that we exported out of Soundbooth, and notice that I now have that that XML file is powering the playback of the F4V that we're about to encode, right? And notice that we've got a whole bunch of parameters down here that are associated with those cue points, and we're pretty much good to go if we wanted to use these cue points within our F4V or FLV. Another thing that the F4V container format for H.264 video is good for is the ability to include source XMP metadata along with that video file. So if you have an asset management system that depends on XMP metadata to sort everything, or if you use Bridge a lot, and Bridge is basically being the file browser for the Creative Suite. If you use that a lot and you want to be able to track your videos with XMP metadata, the F4V file format is a great format for you. You can rename an F4V file as an MP4 or an M4V or an MOV, and it'll play back just fine within the Flash player. But if you want to retain that XMP metadata, you're going to want to name it as F4V. So something that's good for you to know. Then we'd go ahead and we'd encode this and come on back, and there's our F4V file and our XML file. Now, on Adobe Labs, I know you guys are web folks, so you probably checked out Adobe Labs, for new stuff in Flash and Fireworks and Dreamweaver and what have you. But on Adobe Labs, within the next few weeks, is going to be this example right here, right? And this is just an example file that Adobe built to showcase what's possible with using that video and that XML file. And I'm just going to have a look inside Firebug, right? I'm sure you guys know about the free add-on inside of Firefox for Mac and for PC called Firebug. Right down here in the lower right-hand side, you see I've got that little, looks like a June bug of sorts. And when I click on that, I get a text description of my entire my entire site, and I can look into the HTML. I can look into my CSS, and when I click on various elements, I can also look at the CSS that over here in the right-hand panel that is affecting that element. But what I wanted to show you is that inside the header of this document are a video URL and an XML URL that's showing you that this video player is referring to that F4V file and to that XML file. So all I need to have searchable video is an XML file that has the transcript out of Soundbooth and an F4V or an FLV file that can play back within Flash Player 9 or 10. So there's our video. So now when I type in after, right, notice that this application queues up after, and when I click there, it's going to queue it up so that when I play it, it'll queue up to the point in the video where he says After Effects.
Movie and then use After Effects and all the rest of the tools.
Right, hopefully you heard that. So this demo file is going to be available on Labs this coming week. They just released it to the solutions engineers this week. But just, imagine, if you will, creating a very simple application where all you need is a speech-to-text transcript and a video, and you'd be able to parse through your entire video. So Adobe has, created this speech search functionality for you, gratis, to help you get started, making your videos more searchable. So that's really cool. Okay, so I've talked a lot about Flash. I haven't talked at all about Fireworks or Dreamweaver. And I haven't talked about Device Central. Are you guys doing mobile device work? Are you doing?
We're comping for it and having a third party do all the back end for mobile device.
Okay. Well, so then I won't. I'll tread a little bit lightly on Device Central. I'm sure you've probably heard of Device Central. You may, you may be using it a little bit. You may not be. But I just wanted to highlight one of the really great new features of Device Central, which is the online repository of different devices that you could be designing for. So, if, for example, you had a mobile design inside of Flash, and you wanted to kind of test it out on a bunch of different handsets, that's what Device Central has always been good for. But and I'm just going to go ahead and compile this inside of Flash. What will happen is that if you've set your publish settings correctly within Flash, Flash will actually open up Device Central and attempt to run your movie on whichever device it has currently installed. And right now, it looks like it's got, let's see, if I try it on Flashlight 3, so there we go. There's our, there's kind of a generic Flashlight 3, right? Flashlight is the name of the mobile platform of the Flash player. So in other words, just like the way that the Flash player lives in your browser and Air, or the Adobe Integrated Runtime, lives on your desktop and allows content created in Flash or created in Flex to be viewed on your desktop or on your browser. So Flashlight is the kind of platform extension of the Flash player that allows content to be viewed inside mobile devices. And currently there's something like 800 million, almost a billion mobile handsets currently that are deployed with Flashlight 3. And with the Open Screen project, which launched in May or June of last year, of this year, 2008, licensing around Flashlight has actually disappeared. So any handset manufacturer can download the Flashlight spec and then distribute it freely on their handset or on their mobile devices. And a lot of the kind of video game manufacturers have taken advantage of this. As you can see, there's profiles along the left-hand side here, which is actually an online library. And this online library is basically a repository of all the different handset manufacturers and all the different handsets that they make, and all the different models, and what version of Flashlight they have enabled. So, as you can see, NEC has, several different Flashlight-enabled devices that they ship, and the ones that don't have any Flashlight devices are grayed out, so they're not applicable to this current application that we're running. But, if I were to choose, for example, a Nokia, let's run down to the N95, which is kind of the hot, right? The N95 8 gig. If I were to choose the N95 8 gig by double-clicking, what would happen is that Device Central would install that device on my local machine. So now in my local library, I have a profile of the N95. And you know, if I kind of zoom in here, you can see that it's that the device is actually skinned for playback. So showing this to a customer is really great to be able to show them, yes, not only am I targeting that device that you want me to target, but here's what it's going to look like on the phone itself. And then I can actually play around with it. And over on the right-hand side, I have the ability to tweak all different types of performance settings. For example, if I wanted to simulate the performance on my lovely MacBook with an Intel chip, and I wanted to you know, calibrate the performance down to this tiny processor on this small handheld device, I could just calibrate it, and then my performance would actually simulate what the phone would look like. And I can also specify what type of network conditions, right? Am I connected or am I trying to connect? What is my download speed? What is my network latency? What is my persistent storage? And all the different types of you know, parameters for very realistic testing. And I can also look inside of my device profile and see all the different, you know, what the addressable size of my screen is, you know, what kind of browser I'm looking at here, what formats are supported inside that browser. So it's really, you know, not to dwell on Device Central, but for those who are developing for mobile, who are starting to develop for mobile, it's a very powerful platform. All right, so that's a lot on Flash. I'm going to get going really quickly over in Fireworks because Fireworks is going to lead us over to what's new in Dreamweaver as well. And with that, we're going to close it up because you know, I was hoping to wrap this up by 4 o'clock. So right now, what we're looking at in Fireworks, and you know, Fireworks came over to Adobe with Macromedia, just as Flash and Dreamweaver did, and it's kind of one of those applications that has this enormous amount of power and functionality, but it's really overlooked with the rest of the Creative Suite and the rest of the Web Suite. And you know, maybe I should ask, does your team use Fireworks? Is it familiar with Fireworks in any way?
I don't like using anything that writes web code for me, typically. So I try to shy away from it and write it on my own, but that's just me.
A lot of our team uses Photoshop and Illustrator because they're getting some of the layouts coming from the art directors to them.
Right. Gotcha. So, you know, I'm just going to show you some of the, you know, I mean, there's definitely a lot to, you know, a lot to say about programs that write code for you. And, you know, Fireworks in the past has only written table-based HTML, you know, so that if I were to export a page like this, well, wait, let's go back to this page. And, you know, for prototyping purposes, like if I just wanted to bang out some wireframes, like this, for example, is not a finished design, but if I just wanted to create very simply a kind of a wireframe structure, and you know, this is probably the simplest type that you could imagine, you know, where I wanted to look on a features page or a fashion page or, you know, any of these different types of pages, and very quickly and rapidly have a clickable prototype that, you know, would have rollover functionality and that would have, you know, clickable buttons, and then export that as a, you know, as HTML and images. Let's see, make sure that I'm in the right folder, and put those in a subfolder. I want all the correct states, right? So if I wanted to create a very simple mock-up that, you know, just to show a client or just to show a customer, right? And it's creating them out there. Let's open that up with Firefox. Right, so as you can see, it's preserving the you know, and this is a wireframe. This is not anything too complicated. It's just to give us a sense of the functionality of the layout, just to get a very quick, you know, kind of sign off. And so creating inside of Fireworks something that's not going to be the final code, or that's not going to be the final the finished product, but that's going to make something that you can just upload to your FTP and very quickly show your client, saying this is the functionality. This is you know, Fireworks is not usually thought of as a wireframing tool, but having clickable wireframes is something that a lot of IAs information architects or usability experts would probably like to have, and that I've never really played around with Visio or with OmniGraffle to see what their clickability features are, but Fireworks makes it pretty drop dead simple. There's just there's a slice tool and there's a hotspot tool. You create a hotspot and you set the destination point within the different page system here. And making rollovers is as easy as clicking on one of your rollovers and adding a simple rollover behavior that you've created another state for, right? So that's pretty nice. That's pretty good. But once you have come on out and done your prototypes, and you feel pretty good with your wireframes, and you've actually created a design that you like, right? And this is just giving you an idea of going from the wireframes out to your actual final design that your client likes is easy, because you can use the same tool to do your design and your wireframing, and that's something that you're not going to see in Visio or in in OmniGraffle. Is you're not going to be able to design and do your discovery phase within the same application. But once you've gone ahead and done that, you can slice this up a number of different ways. And notice that we've sliced our images and we've sliced our backgrounds, and we have what's called links here. And these are actual HTML component symbols that apply a whole bunch of different CSS-based properties in those HTML component symbols. And we can add these HTML component symbols from within Fireworks' common library, right? I'm just going to zoom it up here. And notice that there's HTML and HTML enhanced, right? So within, a link, you can just drag a link onto your comp, and then you have the customizability of all of these different, CSS-based properties. You also have the ability to create what's called the three-slice technique, which, if you're familiar with CSS, you're going to, be familiar with, is the ability to create rounded corners on your rectangles and then have a region that repeats inside of your, rounded rectangle, so that text or content within the rectangle that you're trying to create will expand. So as you'll notice, I've created a top slice of my rounded rectangle in this example. I've created a middle slice, which if I click there and look in my properties, where is my cursor? There we go. Right? We're going to see that I've set this as a background image that's going to repeat along the y-axis, or that's going to repeat and scroll vertically. Right? This is something that you could not create before, and it's going to keep the text within the boundaries of the slicing that you've created. So notice that we've also sliced this the image inside as well, and so any text that we're going to add within Dreamweaver is going to scroll very nicely within the limitations of that slice. And notice also that these are HTML, right? This is a what is it called? A text field, a Mac text field, and a text and a button as well, right? This is a Mac button, and these are going to show up when we export these as CSS and images. They are going to come in as actual functional tags, as form tags. A form tag will be created, and a field and a button input tag will be created in our HTML. So, as loath as we are to accept pre-formatted code, I just want to show you what happens when we say File Export, and we're going to come out to our desktop and our output folder. We're going to export as CSS and images, and we're going to align the page to the center. And so now that we've exported, we're going to come out and have a look inside of, I'll open this up in Dreamweaver, if Dreamweaver will allow me to open it. The results of what comes out is something that looks like this. Right? You have that slice ability to create let's try it with this. Let's try it with this guy and see if how this works. Right? We'll just call it Untitled CSS and Images. Right, open that up in Dreamweaver. Ah, there we go. But notice that inside of Fireworks, we had this lovely 3-slice setup with this rectangle that had rounded corners and text inside. And in Dreamweaver, let's open up Split View here and have a look at our code. Right? So we've created a main div, and we have a 3-slice container div, right? Because Fireworks recognizes that we're doing this 3-slice container method, and the div ID for the top is top1. And now we have all of this text, and I'm just going to, type in here, and notice what happens over on the left. Notice that the text is wrapping, and our div is expanding because we added that background property to expand along the y-axis. So notice that the div is nicely expanding. It looks exactly the way we would want it to do. So that's just really great. And, just having a look at some of the CSS is as easy as clicking on this related files. Right? Notice that now we can kind of go into our CSS, and I can just kind of click in here and wait for the cast navigator. Notice that we have this new little, ship captain's wheel to click on. That brings up the cast navigator. I'm sorry, the code navigator, and we get a little window showing us all the different CSS properties that are pertaining to this text. And so, have a look at inside of box 3-slice container. Right, it's being positioned with margins, and it's an inline display, and it's using floats. So this is standards compliant CSS that's being used to export this, right? It's not junk CSS. It's actual, it's using margins and and floats to do the positioning of the elements. So even though you might not want to use that CSS out of the box, if your designer can at least do the export to CSS and images, it's going to get you that much closer to where you eventually want to be. It's not providing you the final code, but it is setting up a framework for you to move forward with your coding, right? And then here's all of the different aspects of the text, right? And it sets up the same font and the same alignment and the same color and the same line height that you had set up within Fireworks. So that's really great. And the last example inside of Fireworks, actually there's 2 more examples inside of Fireworks before we get going inside of Dreamweaver. One is the ability to open native PSD files. Notice that I just did File Open, and I'm opening a PSD file inside of Fireworks. Excuse me. And, if I have layer comps inside of Fireworks, I can bring in those layer comps. Notice that it's recognizing all the different layer comps. If you use Fireworks a lot and you use layer comps to show the different states of your website document, you can bring each one of those layer comps into Fireworks and insert them as an individual page in your Fireworks document. But I'm just going to choose that one. And notice that it brings in my Photoshop document pre-sliced. Now, I have done all of this slicing inside of Photoshop, so I don't want you to think that it somehow intelligently recognizes all of the rectangles inside of our Photoshop document and then just add slices of them, right on. But that would be really cool. But it, unfortunately, it's not quite that knowledgeable yet. But just hitting the key, the number 2 key, I can see where my slices are and where my slices aren't. And once again, I can grab this background slice and I'm trying and give it a background, and I don't want it to repeat. And then I can notice that the text that came over from Photoshop is not sliced. I didn't slice it up in Photoshop. And double-clicking in here, you can notice that text coming over from Photoshop and Illustrator is now editable because Fireworks and Photoshop and Illustrator all share the Adobe text engine, or the ATE, which allows text to come over with a great deal of fidelity when you're doing round tripping between Fireworks, Illustrator, and Photoshop. So that's really great to know. But something that's even better is that when you export this as CSS and images, this text is going to come in as HTML text, and each one of these rectangles is going to be recognized as its own div and positioned using the margins and padding and floats. So let's see what that looks like in action. Remember, I've done very little to nothing to this file, and I'm just going to say File, Export, CSS and Images, right, in the output folder. Make sure that it's centered, right, so we get a div align for center. This is going to be called CheckMag Home. Oops, I forgot to put the images in their own separate folder, but no big deal. Bring it into Firefox. Right, and here we go. We've got that lovely HTML text, which, just opening it up in Firebug and having a look, let's have a look at the that car image, right? This lovely yellow car, and have a look at our CSS, and we're going to notice, just like before, inline, floated to the left with margins, using margins to do the positioning. And this is all great, beautiful, wonderful HTML text, right? That when we add to it, subtract to it, all of the container divs are going to expand the way that you'd want them to. So this is probably my favorite feature of Fireworks. There's a million other great features of Fireworks. Just as I showed you that clickable prototype of the walkthrough that we did, the wireframes, right? Clickable wireframes. You can also do clickable desktop applications using air mouse events. So, in this particular illustration, what I've done is created a simple 5-page comp inside of Fireworks, and this is all just one PNG file. And if I click on, I'm going to turn on the web layer and show all of the different hotspots. Right, this right here is just a hotspot that I've come up and said commands air mouse events drag. And what that allows me to do is when I deploy this as an Air, or as an Adobe Integrated Runtime desktop application, it will allow me to publish this this prototype and drag it around on my desktop. On this one right here, I've created an air command, air mouse events close, so that when I roll over and click that close button, it'll actually close the application. So if I wanted to come up and say create air package out of this 5-page prototype that I've created, I wouldn't even necessarily need to go through and put in my digital signature and include any of the files and go through all of that. All I'd have to do is click the preview button to get a very quick preview of what this is supposed to look like when it's deployed as an Air application. And then I can package this up as a .air file and send it over to my client and say, this is kind of how we're going to keep our brand alive, not only in the browser, not only on the mobile device, but also on our desktop. So, with a little bit of luck, this thing is going to preview very nicely for me without crashing. But I may not have the best of luck here. I'm going to try it one more time. Excuse me. So once I'm just going to let this run in the background and see if it actually works. I've had limited success. Well, it seems to be doing it. I'll just give it another second, and then show you something really cool from within Fireworks before we just jump to Dreamweaver. No, I guess it's not going to do it for me today. But let's say it did pop up our application. I think I've got too many applications running right now, which is probably one of the major problems. So let's say it did pop open an Air prototype application, and I wanted to show instead of packaging it up as a .air, I just wanted to show my customer or my client really quickly what it looked like floating around on the desktop. I could just go to File, Share My Screen, inside of Fireworks. And by the way, I'm going to go inside of Dreamweaver and say, File, where is it? Share my screen, right there. Or I could go to that from within Flash and say, File, share my screen. Every Creative Suite application has a File, share my screen path that when I click there, it's going to log me into my Acrobat.com account. And what you're going to see, hopefully it's not going to kick us out of our current Connect session. I don't think that it will. But what this is going to allow me to do is to share my screen, much as I'm sharing my screen with you right now. It's going to allow me to open up Connect Now, which is a screen sharing application that's free on Acrobat.com. Right? Hopefully you're seeing this. Let me know, actually, if you're seeing the Connect Now dialog.
Yeah, we got you.
Okay. So notice there's a dialog here showing me that I have my own Connect Now URL. Right? And I can customize my meeting URL to be whatever I want, and I can send an email. Now, this is for up to 3 attendees simultaneously. And so, you know, I could email that URL, or I could, you know, send an invitation. And now I have the ability to chat. I can start my camera, right? Let's see. Let's see if it's going to come through, right? This is me. Hopefully you can see me over connect. But, right, you see me up in the upper right-hand corner there?
Oh, yeah, we see it.
All right. And, right, so I just maximize it so you can get a sense of where I am. This is the lovely New York office in Adobeville. And I'm just going to make that a little bit smaller, and I'm going to pause my camera. Right? Excuse me. But I also have a lot of different pods. For example, during this meeting, if I want to share, if I want to upload a file, I can upload, you know, that Air document that I created for them and say, hey, you know, check it out. Why don't you download it and see if it works for you? And then they'd be able to pull that file. I'll just upload a sample file, right, blog.html. And so now you would be able to pull that down and save that selected file. I could also now share my computer screen, right? Let's see. Would you like to share your screen? I'm not going to do it because I'm not going to share my sharing, if you get my drift. But let's close that up. And I've got all kinds of different, up to 5 gigabytes I have to share. But I'm going to get out of Connect Now. That's really just a teaser for what you can do with Connect Now. Coming on back to Dreamweaver. Right? I've already showed you the ability that you have within Dreamweaver to, you know, to kind of click over any div and pull up that code navigator, which shows you all of the different CSS characteristics of your, you know, of whatever's inside that div, of whatever element you're focusing on. Right? For example, this footer text, right, it's showing me all the different properties. So this is 1M, which is actually a little large. If I were to click on that property, notice that Dreamweaver pops open footer.text, that ID for that footer text now. It pops it open within styles.css, and I've retained my visual reference from the CSS. You know, it used to be that if I wanted to look at CSS, I would lose design view. But now, since I have the related files all tiled up here, I can look at my source code for whatever's in design view. I can look at my CSS. I can look at my JavaScript. So you can manipulate not only the interactivity through the JavaScript or the you know, the styling and the presentation layer with the CSS, but also kind of the, you know, the glue, which is the HTML, all within one view using this related files toolbar. And you can say view split vertically to get a vertical view on your code, which is just that's a nice to have that a lot of coders have been waiting for a long time. So I'm just going to grab that footer text one more time and come in here and make it a little bit smaller. Let's zoom it in, and I'll just make that 0.7 ems instead of 1 em. And then when I click back inside, notice that the footer resizes automatically. So again, I can get there by hitting Control Alt on a PC or Command Option on a Mac, and clicking in there, just pops it open, make the change, and you're good to go, which is really beautiful. If you're doing dynamic development and you're creating a bunch of data bindings, you're using PHP, MySQL, ASP, JSP, any of those server languages, and you have a record set that you're bringing in bindings for, or you're using an XML feed to do that. When you're designing in Dreamweaver, you're not necessarily going to get a feel for what your design is going to look like. But if you use this new feature called Live View, which is just this little button right here, you can turn it on. You can visualize what your site layout is going to look like with all of the dynamic, with all the dynamic content populated in there. So this is utilizing all the different CSS effects, all the JavaScript effects, and it's pulling in the live data. But if you want to see what that data looks like actually populated in there, because right now we're only seeing the HTML without the actual data populated into into our file. So I can turn on this button called Live Code, and now we can actually get a look at what the code looks like once we have put it in. So notice that when I'm doing this rollover, I'm going to click on this button here, and notice, hopefully you'll see this within Connect, but when I change the rollover state of each of these buttons now, you're seeing, I get to see how my div class is changing. This particular div is changing from a master column selected to master column selected hover, right? Because the CSS source file is giving this a hover state. So we have a view not only into the live view of our page, but also into the, what the code looks like, kind of dynamically changing under the hood. And if I wanted to make an actual change to that, like I'll click here, and then I'll roll over, and in line 79 of my code, right, you're going to notice over on the left on line 79, it's going from master column hover to just master column. So I'm going to freeze JavaScript. I'm going to hit function F6. And now JavaScript is frozen. Notice that none of my effects are taking place anymore. So I can come on in to line 79, and I can pull up my code navigator and have a look at the CSS. Right? So the background color right now is that light orange. Let's say I wanted to change it, and I just pulled up that property right now. I'm going to change it to FFF000, make it an ugly yellow. Just for the case of example here, and jiggle the handle there, and now you'll notice that, right, we've changed the background color within the CSS. We didn't have to hunt and peck anymore. So the code navigator and live view and live code are helping you with real contextual linkage inside of your code to be able to jump to the other parts of your code that are important without having to hunt and peck, without having to do a lot of scrolling, without having to. So it's really, maximizing your time as a developer. So one last thing that I wanted to leave you with, and we're not going to go into contribute right now, partially because I haven't loaded up those assets, but also partially because there's a new contribute-like feature and functionality within Dreamweaver that's called in-context editing. And in-context editing is pretty much the way it sounds. It's going to allow your customers, your clients, the people for whom you're doing your development to make changes to their own website without the webmaster bottleneck getting involved. And your customers, your clients won't necessarily need to have Dreamweaver or Contribute or any part of the Adobe Adobe Creative Suite installed. And so the way that this works is you would create inside of Dreamweaver, you as the webmaster would create inside of Dreamweaver an editable region using the in-context editing insert panel. Right? So if I wanted to, for example, create a repeating region or create an editable region, let's create this as an editable region, and notice that we've got a new tag that says editable region. And while this div is selected, let's make it a repeating region as well. So this is now a repeating region, which we can then publish to our website, go into any web browser whatsoever. I'm just just going to close those up. And let's see. So here's that page live on our website, right? And notice that this is being hosted. This isn't being hosted on Adobe servers or anywhere. This is being hosted on a live website. And all I'm going to do is hit a very simple keystroke while I'm in my browser, right? This is Firefox. Excuse me. I'm going to hit a very simple keystroke, which is Command-E on a Mac or Control-E on a PC. And I get a new toolbar inside my browser, which is called the Adobe In-Context Editing toolbar. So imagine that you are your client right now, and you have the ability to edit your own website just by clicking that button. And so now I can come in to this editable region that was created for me within Dreamweaver, and make some changes. So I'm just going to change this one word, bling shizzle. I'm going to turn that red. So let's turn that red right there. And also notice that if I come in here and I want to change the date text to red, notice that I can't do it. So if you come on back into Dreamweaver, you're going to notice that if I open up my Properties Inspector, there's a way for me as a webmaster to control what formatting properties my client will be able to control. Do I want them to be able to bold, italics, underline, justify, do font size or color or add pictures or images? So I have a fine level of control over what my customer, within whichever div I designate, where they can make changes. So let's say my customer's finished here and they want to add a new blog post. So all they'd have to do, since I created a repeating region, would be to click on this button called Add a Region, or they could just very simply duplicate the region that they already have. And all I did was click, and I made a new reverse chronological blog post, which I would then call, December 15th, and let's see, McCann rules, and just put some text in here about how Jerry loves McCann forever. And then all I'd have to do as my customer is hit save and hit done. Sorry, I was supposed to hit done there. And then I could publish it. And that would go live to my website. And then coming back to the McCann web engineer, as the web engineer, you'd have the ability to manage a whole bunch of different websites, including the one that we were just managing. Whoops, that's not where I wanted to click. And I'd also be able to have different users. So I myself am an administrator, but Devin is only an editor, so he can't publish. Right? I'm able to just set the permissions so that if he were to do the editing that I just did, he would not have the ability to publish. He could only send that copy of the change over to me for review, and I as an admin, or I as a publisher, would be able to publish it. So, and then within the dashboard for each of the admins, you'd be able to see who made changes, who saved the draft, who published a draft, who submitted a draft for review. So it's really kind of a content management / publishing server solution that's not shipping right now, but will be shipping in either Q1 or Q2 of 2009.